Welcome into the Tech Ed Podcast. My name is Matt Kirchner. As our audience knows, every single week we are talking about topics of interest to manufacturing, to education, to public policymakers, to government officials, really the whole world that encompasses advanced manufacturing. And we talk a lot not only about our mission to secure the American dream for the next generation of STEM and workforce talent, but about how we attract as many people as we can to amazing careers in advanced manufacturing. Of course, that includes women. As somebody married to an engineer, as somebody who saw the great opportunities that women have in manufacturing, this is a topic of particular interest to me and to our guest, who comes to us in the form of Allison Roberts Grealis, who is the founder and president of Women in Manufacturing. I love the clarity of the name of that organization, no ambiguity at all, Allison, about what it is that you're advocating for and what you're doing. But let me start out by just welcoming you here to the studio of the Tech Ed Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. And we were talking a little bit in warming up about your background, where you're from, in growing up in the great state of Ohio, and had a father, it sounds like, that perhaps spent a little bit of time in manufacturing himself. So would love to hear a little bit about your background and then what inspired you to found Women in Manufacturing.
Sure. So originally I was born in upstate New York. So my parents were both from the Albany area of New York State, and my father did work in manufacturing. He was in a sales capacity, so he worked for Firestone Tire and Rubber.
Awesome.
And that job took him from Rochester, New York to Akron, Ohio, the once rubber city and capital of the U.S. So I grew up in West Akron, and from there pursued a degree in English pre-law women's studies for my undergrad degree, and had a big passion around women's issues and women in leadership. And from there got a master's in public administration, and I wasn't really sure how to apply those types of backgrounds to a professional career, but found trade association work. And so I've been doing trade association work for about 23 years.
Wow.
And first started with a metal forming association. And from there got to meet lots of women in industry who helped me spirit with them the concept of creating community just for women in industry.
So, I mean, that is like hardcore traditional manufacturing country, right? It's a beautiful part of the United States and really part of the great tradition of manufacturing that we have here in the United States. So you mentioned that you work with trade associations, and I think for our listeners who may not be familiar, manufacturing is flush with organizations that are doing all kinds of great advocacy. And so it doesn't matter what section of education or manufacturing that you find yourself in, there is an association of some sort that is doing a combination of continuous learning, of industry advocacy, of putting people within that industry together to learn things from each other, to share best practices, certainly to do some work around public policy and lobbying in a lot of cases, all kinds of really great things happening in the world of organization management and leading great organizations. So you're familiar with the different types of organizations, Allison, that exist in the world of manufacturing and education. Tell us a little bit about how WIM's approach differs from maybe some of the other industry associations that our listeners might be familiar with in terms of how you support great careers for women in manufacturing.
Sure. So I started the Women in Manufacturing Association, which we fondly call WIM, 14 years ago. And, our organization is very focused on supporting and promoting and inspiring women in manufacturing careers. So specifically focused on women who are in careers in manufacturing, but we also partner with great organizations as we look to the next generation of talent. So whether it be a technical education school, a community college, educators, parents, career counselors, we work with them heavily as we talk about the next generation of talent coming into manufacturing. But our association presently is almost 30,000 members strong, and we've got members in every U.S. state. We're in 70 plus countries. And our goal really is to help a woman who is in a career in manufacturing be successful. And success can look like all different things.
Sure.
And it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to rise to president or leadership or C-suite, but helping them have a successful enterprise and experience in manufacturing. So we provide lots of tools and resources for women and then as well for companies. So our membership is unique as a trade association. So many trade associations are just corporate-based. We are hybrid, so we have individual members and corporate members. And we have about 500 unique corporate members of WIM.
Wow.
So we work with them on what are the best resources for them as they're recruiting and retaining and advancing their female talent.
Absolutely. So you think about 14 years, 30,000 members. You've been a little busy, right? That's some pretty impressive growth. So that's awesome. And I would understand the corporate members or the manufacturing company members that are part of it. The women that are members of the organization, give me a sense for who those folks are.
Yeah, so we have members from all different facets of manufacturing. So we have people that are early career who maybe are an apprentice or they are co-op or just starting in manufacturing. And then we have all the way up to owners, presidents. of mainly small to mid-sized privately held companies who are in that ownership seat. But we've got companies and people of all different facets of manufacturing.
Sure.
So a lot of food and beverage, automotive, a lot of truck, highway. So all different types of manufacturing, but we've got people in all different seats. And we really try to reach women where they're at. And so we try to tailor our programs to all the different types of members that we have, depending upon where they are in their career.
Yeah, I like that. And so, for a couple of things, number one is I like the fact that you mentioned on the different aspects of manufacturing. I think maybe people from outside the industry say, oh, if I'm manufacturing, I'm in metal stamping or I'm in metal forming or I'm in die casting or what have you. And we really get into a lot of different aspects of things like food production, chemical production, process control. I mean, all these different aspects of manufacturing that kind of fall under that umbrella. So the individuals that are part of the organization, Allison, what do they come to you looking for that they maybe can't get anywhere else? What is it specific that you do for them that's unique?
Yeah, individuals usually join us for lots of different reasons. I would say primarily it's to have a support network and to have access to resources. So when I first started the organization, a lot of our early members were one of just a few, or sometimes the only female at their company.
Sure.
So when I started WIM, I was working with a metal forming trade association. So I know metal forming and all of its
Right.
processes very
Yeah.
well. And many of these women were second, third generation leaders in manufacturing, and in this instance, metal forming. And they were taking over companies and family businesses, and they were looking for others like them that they could bounce ideas off of and gain information and intelligence from. So really, those first women kind of sought after that support and that network and resources, and still present day. I would say that's the bulk of why people join us. We do offer lots of professional development resources. So when we do an annual survey with an organization called Xometry, what we find is that women are most hungry for professional development resources. So that is something that we try to, we have designed and we're continuing to design for them to help them as they're elevating or expanding in their career.
Got it. So let me ask you this: when you say they're coming to you for professional development resources, do those look different for a woman in manufacturing than they would for the general population?
I think the difference is the cohort, the cohort to which they're learning. So, just by subscription and when they're part of a 30-person class, let's say for a management development program, while the content may not be female specific, they're developing kind of a cohort of other females that hopefully those connections last well beyond the completion of the course.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And, I mentioned in the intro, my wife, Renee, who's got a master's degree in engineering for what that's worth. But when she was going through her engineering program for undergrad, one of 4 women that were in that program, in an entire engineering program, believe it or not, of, I don't know, probably hundreds of students. And she was one of 4. That was back in the early 90s now, so we're starting to cover some ground, 30, 35 years or so. Are we making progress? I mean, you've been at this for 14 years. How has it changed in terms of where we were back in 2010 versus where we are in 2024, thanks in part to the work you're doing?
Yeah, so I mean, there's been some improvement. When I started working with the first trade association 20 plus years ago, there sadly was not a whole bunch of women who would be at trade shows and events like here at MTS. There were women not often at industry conferences.
Right.
And so I do think the population has changed, that we do see more women in manufacturing. When we started the organization back 14 years ago, we were about 22%, 24%. It kind of hovered between that range. And now present day, we're almost 30% of the manufacturing workforce. So there's been improvement. And, not only do we look at trying to gain more women in industry, but as well more women in leadership.
For sure.
So, presently 1 in 4 females are leaders in manufacturing. So the goal would be to obviously increase that number too.
Yeah, absolutely. We always joke at shows, and we are at the International Manufacturing Technology Show as we record this particular episode of the Tech Ed podcast. And, manufacturing shows are like the one place you go where the line for the men's room is longer than the ladies' room, right? And so that just kind of put it into perspective. But we are making progress, and I can tell you a couple things. The first one is, and I'm glad you touched on the wide variety of careers in manufacturing, and while in as much as you're advocating for women in executive and leadership and ownership roles, and I know we're going to get into that as we have our conversation today. There are great opportunities, whether that's entry-level manufacturing, whether it's working as a machinist, a welder, a plant supervisor, a production planner, logistics. I mean, just this whole host of opportunities in manufacturing. So I'm really glad you mentioned that. You mentioned some of the ways you're measuring your impact in terms of, you were at 24% of the workforce, now 30, and women in leadership roles. Are there other things that you look to, Allison, to know that the work you're doing is paying off?
Yeah, so we look at the number of people participating in our programs. So we have national programs that we produce, some of which are regional conferences that celebrate regional manufacturing and leaders. So those numbers have grown year over year in our regional conferences that we produce. We look at our annual summit, which is our big annual meeting, And what used to be a 200-person conference will now be about 2,000 people in
Wow.
Boston this year.
In Boston. When is that going to be?
That is October 6th through the
Okay,
9th.
awesome. Coming up.
And we will have 70 educational tracks. We have keynote speakers. We'll do about 30 plant tours of manufacturing companies. And then as well, we look at the people that we're reaching virtually. So pandemic had been one of those, had been a positive outcome for us in many respects because it forced us to embrace technology and really be accessible to all or to more people than we had been prior. So we look at our virtual learning that we produce monthly, which is at no cost to members. And our participation rates are huge, especially beyond borders. So people from all over the country listening in for an hour of learning. And then what's nice too is that we record all of our learning sessions so people can access them afterwards. So we look at the downloads as well. So not just the people live, but people that access it later.
Yeah, awesome. Reaching tons and tons of people with really important work, not just on the manufacturing side and the membership side, but also on the education side. And you touched on a little bit of that, but I also know that you have your own education foundation, correct? Tell us a little bit about the work you're doing there.
Yeah, so our education foundation has been around for almost a decade, and we specifically focus on making education and training accessible and affordable to all women and allies in industry. And so, we have formal education programs. We have a program for empowering women in production, a program for early career managers. We have a program for leadership women called Leadership Institute that we do in partnership with Case Western Reserve University.
Great.
And then we have that virtual learning series that we've been powering for more than a decade. And that specifically is, again, meant to be quick hit learning opportunities for people on a variety of different topics. Some are personal and professional development oriented. Others are technology oriented. So talking about robotics, automation, AI, cybersecurity, but we also get into a whole bunch of different professional development topics too.
Got it. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but how many different topics would you say you touch with that?
I know we have about close to 200 hours of learning that's in our virtual learning library.
Wow.
So we've captured a lot of knowledge, expertise, and as well highlighted a lot of people that are knowledge experts in different areas. So there's lots of things on demand.
Available to members, or how does that work?
That is available to members and non-members.
Okay, awesome.
So it's a very low fee if you're a non-member to access any of that information.
Got it. So I could guess at some of the challenges that maybe women face in career advancement in manufacturing that are unique to women, but rather than me guessing at it, I'd love to have you tell me. I'm sure there's specific areas where where they may struggle to advance, or whether maybe they're not seeing the opportunities that they'd like to have to advance in manufacturing. What are you seeing there?
Yeah, so I think there have been some barriers for women to advance and to enter the industry since first starting the organization. I think the first is just getting women into manufacturing. So often, even I'm thrilled to see students gaining more awareness around manufacturing careers, but sadly, that still is not often promoted.
Sure.
At elementary schools or at secondary schools. So I think first and foremost, a challenge is getting women into the industry. I think once women are in industry, I think one of the challenges is for them to see pathways for progress and how do I rise and what's my career pathway look like? Manufacturing still is very male dominated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that obviously that landscape is changing. And I think different practices that have been enabled within companies and within facilities have definitely helped to be more inclusive of females in more recent years.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, a large percentage of women and lots of women do take a pause often in career to have kids or to raise a family. And so we know that flexibility is something highly sought after by both women and men present day. And I think that's even been illuminated further and demanded even more intensely post-pandemic. I think people see this need for flexibility. And manufacturing companies, I think, have been quick to adapt. I think it still has been difficult, especially with people that are running machinery and that are required to be at an operation.
Yep.
So I think flexibility is something that has been a challenge for women to really stay in workforce and to advance during especially those child rearing years if they choose to have kids. And then I think as well, finding coaches and mentors and as well having feedback. So when we look at women, some reasons why they sometimes don't advance or why they don't stay in manufacturing is often they're not given the necessary feedback to really help improve whatever skills they may have that could be weaknesses. So when we talk to male and leadership allies of women in industry, we often say, you're doing such a disservice to not give direct feedback to your female employees just as you would your male employees. There's sometimes this skittishness or nervousness, but women need it just as much as their male counterparts so that they can fix whatever things they may have gaps in.
Absolutely.
And then try to refine those for the future so that they could rise to a different position or opportunity.
I hadn't heard that observation before, and that's really, really interesting to me. So what I'm hearing from you, and again, as a male who ran manufacturing companies was responsible for very diverse workforces in a lot of cases. What you're saying is that in some cases there might be a tendency for a male to be hesitant to give feedback to a woman in the workplace in the same way they would to a man. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think it's Harvard Business Review a few years ago did some research around that and found that was one of the biggest barriers for women to advance, is that they weren't getting the feedback they needed at these pivotal points in their career,
Right.
which then led them to not be ready for next promotion or next opportunity because they didn't know they had to have, let's say, different supply chain training, or they needed to improve perhaps their public speaking skills or their communication skills. That feedback really was a hindrance. So we encourage all allies, leadership allies, to just to give honest and direct feedback to, all employees, but including their females.
So you've used this term leadership allies a couple times, and I want to make sure I give you the opportunity
Yeah.
to define what you mean by that. I think I know, but
Yeah.
why don't you enlighten us?
So there's a whole movement around, looking at that term male allies that's been used pretty heavily over the last decade, and really looking at really everyone being an ally for each other. So rather than just male allies in manufacturing, that kind of denotes a little bit that a woman is dependent upon a man to advance. And so leadership allies is a bit more of an inclusive term to say we all can be allies for each other
For sure.
and to help other people rise.
Got it. So these are people that might be working in a company, in an organization, responsible for whether it's a woman's career advancement, mentoring that individual, training. I mean, what have you. These are the people that may not be directly involved in terms of the people benefiting directly from your work as a woman who's trying to advance in manufacturing, but somebody that has a tremendous amount of influence over that pathway, and making sure we're communicating clearly with those individuals and preparing them to help mentor and foster the next generation of manufacturing talent. I love that. You talked a little bit about career advancement, Allison, and thinking about, not just getting direct feedback or honest feedback in terms of performance and opportunity for improvement. What are some of the other challenges that women find in terms of advancing in manufacturing?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is, women who participate in our organization, many of them cite still this lack of confidence in their skill sets and their abilities. And so we do a lot of training in our formal leadership programs around confidence building so that they realize they do have the skills to go for a position or to seek out some new opportunity. There's lots of studies around the fact that if a male and female both see a job position or position description and opening, that the women are often less likely to apply because they don't check all of the boxes, whereas their male counterparts maybe can check 30% of the boxes and they're going to apply. And so we're trying to work with our females that are connected to our organization just to help build that confidence, knowing where they have a skill set and how it can apply, and taking some of those risks and chances to go for a position that maybe doesn't sound exactly like everything they have skills for present day, but obviously there's opportunity to learn on the job.
And I love the way so much of what you're doing is database, and it's not just saying, okay, we think this might be an issue and let's address it. You're saying, here's a study that shows that, women don't get the same amount of direct feedback that they otherwise should in the workplace. Here's another study that says that, hey, they may not be as aggressive in going after an open position because they don't meet every single step of the requirements for that position, whereas a male might for whatever reason say, I'm going to at least take a chance and see what happens. And so those are frankly all kinds of things that I haven't really thought about in terms of, again, being somebody who is a leader and continues to be a leader in manufacturing. So I appreciate you sharing all those insights with our audience. I know they're all learning a ton. Speaking of learning, I know that your leadership lab program is doing a tremendous amount of training and learning around the specific needs of managers and leaders in manufacturing. So touch on Leadership Lab and what you're doing there.
Yeah. So that was a program that we founded, I think now close to a decade ago with Case Western Reserve University.
Yep.
And it's a cohort of typically 20 to 30 executives, director level and above, women in manufacturing. And it starts first with a 360 assessment because many of these women have never had that type of direct assessment and feedback. So really starting with a place of, you may come to the course thinking you know all about yourself and your skill sets as a leader, and then you get to digest in advance of your first session and your first cohort meeting with really how are your peers and your leaders perceiving you and your skill sets as a leader.
And just to interject, 360 assessment would be talking to, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going in and I'm talking to an individual's direct reports and their peers within the organization and the people that they report to and other stakeholders in the organization to really get kind of a transparent view of who is this individual as a human being, as a leader, what are they awesome at, maybe what are some of those areas that they think they're awesome at, and we all have them, that maybe we're not as good as we thought we were. And so that's what's happening, right? You're getting this assessment from your coworkers. Is that where the feedback's coming from?
Correct. As they're admitted into the course and the cohort and class, which is an admission process that we actually go through and make sure that they're the right fit for the program so that they have, that they do have direct reports, that they have a certain amount of leadership years of experience. So we start in that raw space and very transparent place of here's how you're perceived as a leader, here's where you maybe have some gaps. And then they go through about a 20-week experience with their class cohort participants and they get to learn and have knowledge experts and faculty members from CASE and from different think tanks present in different areas. So a lot of the learning is around negotiation, facilitation, how to lead others successfully, how to deliver feedback, some very tangible and tactical things that are learned throughout the class. And then there's obviously practice sessions with one another. And then also we have peer coaching that's a part of the program, and then executive coaching, which we know, I mean, executive coaching can be life-changing for leaders.
For sure.
To have someone who has that tenure to help coach you as how you're perceived again as a leader, how you show up as a leader. So executive coaching is part of that as well. And then what we try to facilitate is after people's completion of the program, that they have this network and again, cohort that they can continue to go back to for advice and guidance. And, it's a very honest class where they're sharing real life problems that they're dealing with in their workplaces and facilities.
Right.
So we hope they continue to give each other support well after the program ends.
Do you have a success story about somebody coming out of that program, or I'm sure you've got tons of them, but one that you want to share with our audience is somebody that was truly transformed by the important work you're doing?
Yeah, one of my favorites. I mean, we've had lots of different profiles of people that participated, but in our first year of the cohort, we were still trying to figure out the exact audience of who was participating. So we had a pilot group that first was in cohort 1. And of there were some people that were not director level, but they were really passionate about WIM and they wanted to advance and they had this hunger and appetite for learning. So one of our participants was a woman who was an office administrator manager for a manufacturing company, actually an aerospace tier supplier, and they were located in Georgia. And she participated in the program and had this, part of the program is identifying kind of your vision. What do you want your vision of your career to be?
Yep.
What do you hope to aspire to? And one of her goals that she very clearly articulated as part of the program was, I want to run this company someday. I want to own this company.
Yeah.
And it was a small privately held company. Fast forward now, almost a decade later, and she now is a co-president of that company.
Oh, that's awesome.
And continues to be in very close contact with her first class that she was a part of in Leadership Institute. They meet regularly. They do Zoom calls to kind of hold each other accountable for their quarterly goals and expectations. And so they've been in a great support group for one another, but as well, she has applied many of the things that she learned in that coursework to then position herself over this last decade to take over ownership, to get the right skill sets to lead a company, and has been very successful.
How rewarding that must be for you, right? To be able to look back over the period of time that you've been doing this and say that, as just one example, and I'm sure there are thousands of them, of people whose lives have been changed as a result of your work. That's got to be incredibly gratifying, I would think.
It is. It's alarming sometimes when I see kind of how small we once were. And then to stand on our stage, for example, at our big annual conference and see thousands of people.
That's amazing.
And it used to be so familial when I first started as a small group. So it's so super rewarding, and it's amazing at each of our events and conferences. Someone will find me and say, you don't know me, but I want you to know that your organization has changed my world and my life and helped me provide for my family and to have confidence. And so that's our goal, is to make people's lives better and to make them have successful careers. But knowing as well that, their success impacts their family, their communities, the people that they're surrounded by. So that's really, it's very rewarding as well.
Absolutely. Well, and as they succeed, they're setting examples for other women and for other employers about how it can be done. And, speaking of those employers, if I'm an employer who, and look, I worked in manufacturing. It's got its own kind of history and its own culture and its own way of doing things. And not to say that manufacturers can't be progressive on a number of levels, but on some other levels, maybe not so much. If I'm saying, hey, I know I need to be doing something differently, I know I need to be better at this, in terms of creating an environment that provides more opportunities for women, if you could give them a couple of pieces of advice, what should they be thinking about?
Hey, I think listen to your employees. So we talk to manufacturers all the time, and they'll often come to us with a problem. I've got a retention issue in my one facility in this location. How can you help me fix this? And, first and foremost, figure out what's going wrong.
You're right.
So listen and survey and talk to the people in that facility to get to the root cause of what is the issue.
I was going to say root cause analysis in the same way that in manufacturing, we'd say, okay, what's the root cause of a defect or a customer issue or whatever? You're saying do the same thing.
Same thing. So why are women leaving? There's got to be some reason why women aren't staying at your facility. So we encourage, companies to authentically and honestly evaluate what's going on in that facility. Could it be a toxic leader? Could it be a culture that's not too great for people that aren't similar or maybe aren't the typical workforce in that facility? So, first and foremost, figure out what's going wrong. And then as well, figure out how to fix it. So we can be an ally organization as you're trying to fix that. So when many companies are going into a facility or operations or a company business line that isn't working well, and isn't necessarily retaining their female talent, we can be a resource. One of the things that we help companies do is to either strengthen an affinity group and or an ERG group, being an employee resource group, which companies now are creating for different populations of their workforce. So we have lots of resources to help companies create those if that's something that can be a fixer solution.
Right.
If women aren't feeling included or don't feel like there's a community of them or a support network at their facility. And then we also have lots of training, obviously, that they can use as they're talking to their leaders and their managers. If, for example, it's a leadership problem, that can be something that we can offer training and education on for them maybe to be more inclusive leaders.
Sure.
If, again, that could be potentially a challenge. So we try to work with companies to fix things, not to say that we can fix everything.
Right, of course
but to help kind of look into what is that problem and help them solve it.
So when you think about doing that root cause analysis and figuring out what are those core issues that women are facing in the workplace and manufacturing, are there a couple that you see come up over and over again?
A lot of, again, women sometimes struggle if they're just one of a few.
So they need to feel part of a community of women.
So they need to feel more of that community. And what we hear from lots of folks, we actually just had a training on this with a faculty member from CASE just a week or so ago, was around, you can't just bring a single person or a single female in and say, okay, I've got a female.
Yeah, right.
It's going to be
look
great.
how diverse we are, right? Yeah.
You need to find a support community. So guess what? If you can't hire multiple people who are from a diverse background, then let that person get connected to, for example, one of our chapters. We've got 33 chapters around the country, and those can be great vehicles for people to feel supported. Not to say that you have to immediately hire, droves of women overnight, but that could be a resource for that person to feel like, okay, there are other people like me out there. I'm going to go to a local WIM chapter meeting and I'll feel more connected or supported.
Awesome. So how many WIM chapters did you say?
We have 33.
Wow. So, and they're spread out all over the country and they have their own, organizational leaders that are doing things regionally, or how does that work?
Yeah, they've got their own local volunteer boards. They are hugely active. So last year they produced about 400 programs.
Wow.
And this year we're on pace to surpass that. So these programs could be a mix of plant tours, networking evenings, professional development workshops. So they offer a lot of different things right now, and they're in the height of golf outing season.
Okay, yeah, right.
So lots of golf outings.
Yeah, awesome. So where does a woman go to become a member of a chapter?
Yeah, so they can go to our website, and on our homepage, you'll find a navigation toolbar which says chapters, and they're all 33 are listed. And as long as you're a WIM member, you can affiliate with as many as you want to.
Awesome. So now I'm a woman. I've found my way into manufacturing. If things are going the way they should, I've got maybe a leadership team that understands some of the unique challenges of a woman, whether it's raising a family or any other challenges in terms of manufacturing. I found my community of people that I can, be in the manufacturing battle with, that are like me, that I can relate to. And now I want to rise to the level of the individual that you referenced earlier that wanted to own their own business someday, the company she was working for. Let's talk about that. I mean, is the road to ownership, different for a woman? And tell us about that journey and how you're supporting women that want to own manufacturing companies.
Yeah, so, that's where kind of my roots were. When I first started within manufacturing and trade association work was with small to mid-sized privately held companies.
Yep.
So I think it is uniquely challenging sometimes for a woman to run a manufacturing business. There are still certain biases out there.
Of course.
And so years ago when I first started the organization, we had a panel at our first conference, our summit, which we call it. And there were 2 female owners that were part of that panel. And they talked about coming to a trade show, and I won't name which trade show,
right,
but coming to a trade show and walking the booths. And as business owners, they were looking for equipment. They were looking for technology and solutions. And no one at the booths was talking to them because they did not look, per se, at the time, a decade or so ago, like a business owner.
Right.
And so I think the challenge for women who run manufacturing businesses present day is still, they sometimes fight with still trying to be seen as a legitimate business owner. And it's sad that still sometimes happens present day. But
does it feel like it's getting better or no?
I do think it's getting better. And actually, we've heard from some of our members that the trade shows that once were scary for them to walk the show before now aren't as much.
Right.
And that they do feel like, people selling to manufacturing leaders now realize that leaders can look lots of different ways.
Right.
And they aren't just always men.
Yep.
So I think business leaders who are female, they also, while they may have some unique challenges, they also have opportunities. So many of our business leaders who are in manufacturing, for example, are going for their WBE certification to become a women-owned business.
Right.
So we have a partnership with WeBank. This year at our summit, for the first time ever, we have a full track dedicated to owners of manufacturing companies.
Awesome.
So presently our goal is to have 50 owners who are part of that special session and those special opportunities for them to, again, meet each other, kind of not exchange just like the dirty and awful stories, but also to provide solutions to one another of how to navigate being a women-owned business and manufacturing. And then also one of the biggest challenges they have is succession planning. So
Yep.
we know that there's 5 generations in the workforce presently. A lot of next generation aren't really for sure on board with taking over family businesses. So that's often an area that we discuss too. And then one other thing that we do offer that I especially love because I get to facilitate is that similar to Vistage, we created our own executive networking groups.
Okay.
So we have small groups of, again, private business leaders as well as C-suite executive directors at larger companies, and they meet about 4 times a year. And that again, sharing has been life-changing for many of these people, not only to fix major business issues, but as well just to have kind of some proper navigation to help them figure out what is their next step, whether it be, again, acquisition, or is it leaving organization to go to another new opportunity, which of course we're not hoping that happens.
Right.
We hope they stay in manufacturing, but again, to help them navigate their own career, but as well their company.
Give us a success story in the executive end of things of somebody who, grew up in manufacturing, has benefited from some of the work you're doing with senior leaders and owners.
Recently I had a member who wrote to me, and she at the time, or when she first started her relationship with WIM, it was a decade plus ago, and she was in, a senior manager role at a company in marketing and communications, and she was looking for a more senior level, and joined our executive networking group, got to start meeting with other leaders who were in the manufacturing space, and started to make lots of great contacts within the industry. She also had the opportunity to serve on our board of directors. She served on our foundation board, and just rose and rose within her career to now a very senior director level at her organization, and actually found her last opportunity through WIM.
Oh, really?
And so she had a small pause where it was outside of kind of work and was looking and seeking, and through WIM's community came to one of our conferences, made a great connection, and it led to a very senior level and very rewarding now career opportunity for her. So, the goal is that we keep people in manufacturing, that we provide them pathways to again stay in industry.
Well, and telling those stories certainly to other women who may have an interest in getting into manufacturing, rising within manufacturing, becoming a manufacturing company owner or executive. But those stories can resonate really, really well with young girls as well, right? I mean, we've got a lot of information that shows that especially girls will start making career decisions as early as middle school, and a lot of times people are surprised to hear that. And it's not so much that they're selecting exactly what they're going to be doing when they get into the workforce, but they start to turn off to certain career pathways. And unfortunately, manufacturing, STEM, and engineering careers are some of the early ones that they turn off to because of the stigma that those are boys' jobs. Heaven forbid, but that's kind of the way that we've trained ourselves to think in some cases. So tell me about the work you're doing all the way down into the middle school, so that girls, not every 8th grader is going to be a machinist or a welder or lead a manufacturing company, but some of them should, and more of them should. How are you reaching those?
Yeah, I mean, our goal is that more and more young women will choose manufacturing. My generation presently, when I was growing up, I know I wasn't presented with the opportunity to join manufacturing.
Right.
I had no idea what it was. I knew that my dad worked with entire manufacturing. It didn't seem hugely appealing to me because I really didn't know much about it.
Right.
And I wish that years ago at my school, someone had come to speak, for example, or we had read a chapter or a book or learned about a case study of a woman in manufacturing, because I can tell you, I would have been hugely interested had I understood the opportunity to apply so many different skill sets within a manufacturing career. And I think that it's all about how are we sharing the story of what career manufacturing is. And so how we're doing that present day is we rely heavily on our chapters, because we know most education, training, and access is happening within communities. So our chapters have done an outstanding job of doing community outreach. They're participating in things like Manufacturing Day to open facilities. They're hosting tours. They're doing class presentations. Many of them are working with Girl Scout troops and educators and career counselors. So we're doing as much as we can within these local regions to let people know, hey, there's an organization that represents women. Here's the types of careers that we all have who are part of the organization, to hopefully inspire someone who's younger to be part of the organization. We also work with lots of organizations that have more student-facing members. So Society of Women Engineers, for example.
Right.
We have worked with them on and off over our last 14 years. We'll be at their trade show this year again, or trying to talk to, again, future budding people who are engineers who hopefully will come into manufacturing.
That's so awesome. And you think about, you offered the example of Girl Scouts. Are there other organizations, maybe or maybe not, but that we should be targeting in terms of where girls are making career decisions, where they're spending their time in middle school, early high school that maybe we're not getting into as deeply as we should as manufacturers?
Yeah, I mean, Girl Scouts is just one of them because it's a female-only population, and obviously they're doing things for badge work, they're doing community service, so that's a ripe audience. But there's obviously now robotics teams, so
Right?
that's a huge opportunity where we see lots of our chapters sponsoring robotics teams and getting involved and being mentors for those robotics
Hmm.
competitions. Because again, these are very, open-minded young
Right?
women who are very easily influenced. And
For
so
sure.
how
Yeah.
great if we can expose them to some
And
manufacturing
they're already interested.
and they're already inclined to that.
I mean, if you're on a first robotics team, if
Right.
you're in VEX, it's because you got an inclination for those kind of things.
So that's another good audience that many of our chapters have reached out to.
Absolutely. Let's talk about CTE. I grew up in a CTE world, or whatever, shop class. I mean, there was a certain group of students that were in shop class, and that was the group of students that were in shop class. And
Right.
and I think to our detriment, lots and lots of students that maybe should have been exposed to that kind of coursework, those experiences, middle school and high school, were not because of their, I'm not even going to call it a stigma. It's just that we were appealing to in technical education a certain type of student. What does CTE need to do? And I'm talking, we've got STEM now. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about more the traditional CTE programs within our high schools and our school districts. How do they need to morph to be more attractive to women?
Yeah. I mean, I think you need to find, populations of women to help educate people about those
Right?
classes. So I think even basic things like promotional brochures and websites and who are the types of grad people that you're
Hmm.
feature females as well that have graduated from the program.
Right?
So it seems like a place for women as
Yep.
well. And so I think just changing the marketing and the messaging and how we're presenting the programs and that opportunity can definitely influence more women joining and wanting to enroll.
For sure. So now let's talk about the teachers. And we talked about the traditional CTE program. There is a traditional CTE teacher as well, who is this. None of this is bad or is criticism, but in my day, it was you had somebody probably doing some welding. You were working on maybe building a birdhouse, or you were say doing woodworking. I mean, these kind of things. And shout out to our amazing CTE teachers all over the country. Let's face it, a lot of these folks, especially if maybe they're into the second half of career as a CTE teacher, aren't necessarily adept at appealing to the unique interests of girls while they're in school. What are one or two things that those tech ed teachers should be thinking about doing so that, and again, there's a lot of them, I'm sure, that have a room full of boys that say, I would love to
Right.
have another 5 or 6 girls in my program. How do I do it? What's your advice?
Yeah. So I would say tap into our community of
Okay.
members. I mean, we have, as I said, 30,000 members plus. We have many of them that are retiring and they're looking for what to do next.
Awesome.
So I would encourage any CTE instructors that might be listening or that are wanting to maybe infuse some diversity in their classes
Hmm.
and to increase the number of female participants, come to us. We would love to connect you to some of our brigade of retired women
Yeah.
that I'm sure would be happy to be a guest lecturer or a guest person to come to your class or to give some insight as to their own experience. And many of them are technical. Many
Absolutely.
of them were engineers. Many of them did welding. Many were in those types of positions or roles. And many of them are wanting to get back. So they're on this, next leg of this retirement career that they've got time. They want to get back to the organization and the industry.
So if I'm a tech ed teacher, I'm a traditional CTE teacher, and I'm saying, look, I wanna make my program more diverse. I want my my student population in my classroom and in my lab to look like the student population of the school itself. Reach out to WIM, connect with your folks, and have some of these great subject matter experts, some of these women who have paved the way bravely in many cases in the world of manufacturing, come back and tell their stories and explain those great opportunities, get young people, especially girls, excited about careers in advanced manufacturing. So that's our advice for CTE teachers. What about the girls? I mean, so I'm a 11, 12-year-old girl. I happen to be listening to this podcast in one of my classes at school. Or what about that individual? What do you want them to know about careers in manufacturing?
I mean, I hope that they'll consider a career in manufacturing and understand that there are so many opportunities. Women are highly sought after present day in manufacturing. I mean,
Hmm.
generally, people are highly sought after in manufacturing. There's lots of open positions to fill, but I would encourage a young woman or girl to think about manufacturing. It isn't what was manufacturing of eons ago.
For sure.
It is more modern than 20 years ago, even when I started to walk through facilities. And I've seen
Totally.
about 1,000 plus manufacturing facilities. They're far more modern than a lot of other places that you go present day. And you can apply so many skill sets and passions for many different things to these positions in manufacturing. I mean, I talked to some of these women, especially in that executive networking group that we have. And, sadly, most of these women fell into manufacturing. And so where our hope or as an aim as an organization is to get more people to choose and select manufacturing as a career of choice rather than to fall into it by accident. So I would encourage a young girl to know that there's lots of opportunities. The pay is actually better than the median pay for another career outside of manufacturing. And then as well to know that you have this whole sisterhood of women in manufacturing that can support you if you were to enter into a career. And our members love to give back. They love to connect with early career individuals and even just someone who is in a middle school position and or in high school and just thinking about options and opportunities. We have tons of women that we can connect people to if they have a passion or interest.
Yeah, I so appreciate all of what you just said. And you think about, in my home state of Wisconsin, manufacturing careers pay 46% better than the average career, non-farm payroll career in the state of Wisconsin. And so 46%, that's real money, right?
That's huge.
And you've got now all of these avenues, women included, to create opportunities for you to have professional development, for you to learn, whether it's the skills-based part of manufacturing, the culture-based part of it, or the leadership part of it. And the sky's the limit. I tell people all the time that manufacturing is still that place that you can start out sweeping the floor and end up running the company, or get a head start at a technical or community college, at a high school technical education program, by earning an industry recognized certification, get that head start. And the sky's the limit in terms of where you can go as a manufacturing individual. So to those middle school students, high school students, the girls that are trying to figure out what's going to come next for me, you don't have to decide today that you're going to be in manufacturing, but you need to have it on your radar because there's way more people that would benefit from these kind of careers than we're reaching. I think it's significantly better than it was 10 years ago, but it needs to be significantly better 10 years from now, and I know it will be thanks to the great work of WIM. I'm going to stay on this topic of our high school and middle school students, and I'm going to take you a little bit back in time, Allison. We're going to take you with our final question back to that time when you are a 15-year-old girl. Maybe you're a sophomore in high school. You've got your entire life ahead of you. I'm sure at that time you were absolutely positive that at some point you were going to found women in manufacturing and be doing the work that you're doing now. But on the outside chance that you weren't thinking about all that when you were 15 years old, tell us what advice would you give that 15-year-old version of Allison if you could?
I think I would have told myself at age 15 in a more loud way, why not me? And so it's something that has stuck with me. We talk about it a lot as an organization, that we want young girls to know, why not me? That you can do these things that maybe you think you really can't do, or that maybe people like you aren't currently doing. So I think I would have encouraged myself more to understand and to own that we can do lots of things. Now, granted, you can't do everything all at once. And we talk a lot about that as well as an organization, that there's a real thing called work-life integration. And sometimes different things take priorities. But I think I would tell my younger self that you can do lots of different things that maybe you don't think that you can at that time. And, I knew at age 15, my big goal in life was to make an impact and to advocate for change. And so I feel so very, very blessed that I get to do that in the work that we're doing every day as an organization. And again, did I know it was going to be working in a trade association or founding a trade association? No. But I think, again, it's figuring out how to match your personal passions with things that you can do professionally. And I again, feel very blessed I get to do that.
We're 180 some episodes into this podcast. We've been doing it now for over 3.5 years. And we've asked that question to a lot of people. Some of the answers are somewhat similar. That is the first time we've had somebody say that. I love that. Why not me? And in other words, you're 15 years old. Somebody's going to change the world. Somebody's going to be president of the United States. Somebody's going to be president and owner of the next great manufacturing company. Why not that 15-year-old girl who's got her entire life ahead of her? You've certainly done incredible work, Allison, changing the world. I've really enjoyed this conversation. As passionate as I am about manufacturing and drawing as many people into manufacturing careers as we possibly can, the work that you're doing, the reach that you've had, and the influence that you've created over the course of these 14 years, really, really impressive. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks to our audience for being with us as well on this week's episode of the Tech Ed Podcast. We talked about a lot of things, access to the website, all these great opportunities and resources that are available from WIM. We will link those all up in the show notes, so check out our show notes. They are the best in the business, and you will find those at techedpodcast/Grealis. That's techedpodcast/GREALIS. So check it out there. You will find all those resources. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Tech Ed Podcast. My name is Matt Kirchner. I am your host, and I will see you next week.